Good afternoon and welcome to my show, Moments with Melinda. And I am deeply honored today to have Governor Howard Dean as my guest. Hi, Governor, how are you?
Thank you for having me on.
I'm so thrilled. We have a lot to talk about today. But
Yeah.
let me tell my viewers, the one or two who may not know who you are, that Governor Howard Dean is an American physician and politician who was the 79th governor of Vermont from 1991 to 2003 and was the longest serving governor in the history of the state, and I think one of the most successful. He ran for the Democratic nomination for the President of the United States in the 2004 election and served as chair of the Democratic National Committee from 2005 to 2011. In 2004, Governor Dean founded the group Democracy for America to help like-minded candidates get elected to political office. Thank you for being on my show, sir.
Thanks, Melinda. It's great to be on.
All right, let's pick it up where we need to, because we only have a half an hour and I could talk to you for days. And my viewers are very hungry for answers, guidance, vision, and explanation. So let's start off right now. How did the Democrats lose in 2024?
We didn't pay enough attention to working people. Bernie was right. He said, it's no surprise that the Democrats, that the public will abandon the Democrats since the Democrats abandon working people. And I think that's true. It's partly our political system, which is both parties are basically funded by huge amounts of cash, legalized by our good friend John Roberts. So the whole system, even though I think that I agree with the Democrats on the issues most of the time, but the whole system is just corrupted by all this money that the Supreme Court, in their haste to make this a right-wing nation, has enabled.
So what could, you chaired the DNC for many years. And so what could the DNC have done better to get us the win?
It's not the DNC, it's the Washington sort of mentality. I always say Washington is basically middle school on steroids. They work hard, they're very smart, and it's all about them all the time. So when the president, when you have a Democratic president, they control the DNC. And fortunately, I did not have a Democratic president when I got there. And so I was elected by the states who were in no mood to put up with the Washington BS. And we were very successful. When I took over the DNC, we didn't have the house. Oh, booey. Hang on a second. I'm
You're a
sorry
busy
about that.
man. You're a busy man.
Yeah, crazy, man. Let me just get rid of this. Um, so anyway, the when I took over, we didn't have the House, the Senate, or the presidency, and when I left, we had all three, and that was because of something called the 50-state strategy. We need to win in the states. We're not going to win in Washington by being on talk shows and all this kind of stuff. We actually have to do the work of knocking on people's doors and listening to them, and I think that's the direction the Democrats are going in now. But it's been a bitter lesson because what's happened to the country is really scary.
Well, West Virginia, was Democratic for many, many decades,
Right.
and they flipped to Trump. And there's a fabulous video where Bernie goes down to meet with Trump voters, and he talks to them about that. It's pretty fascinating. Now, I have a question for you, Governor. Senator Kamala Harris was filling stadiums with tens of thousands of people, and Trump could barely fill the bleachers. With the whole visual of this, how could he have won? I mean, it seems odd. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy nut, but it seems to me like she had more of the country than he did. And I want to know how did that happen?
I think despite Trump and the Republicans' efforts, the election was honest in the last time around.
Okay.
And what the Republicans sell is hate and anger. None of this is your fault. It's all those people's fault. And those people, this is really not much different than what Hitler did. Those people's fault. And so they demonized the Democrats. And we just did not spend enough time listening to the people that had serious grievances. Look, there are a lot of working people in this country who just haven't gotten ahead. And there's zillions and gazillionaires who are sucking up all the money. And, Trump did not appeal to people's sense that things were going to be better. What he appealed to is they were really mad at what things that happened to the things that had happened to people. And that's really what happened. Do I believe that Kamala Harris actually won the election? No.
Okay.
I don't think we ought to go down the road of Trump, who's claimed he's won all three elections he's been in. And I think we're going to have a real problem both in the congressional elections next year and the presidential election in 2028, because they will cheat and they're doing everything they can. But I think it was a legitimate election. And I think Harris got fewer votes than Trump. Trump was legitimately elected president. He's just not a particularly legitimate president because he doesn't care what the Constitution says, and he has a Supreme Court that will rubber stamp anything he wants to do.
Yeah, she lost by, I think, 1%, something like that.
Right. Right.
So during Biden's 4 years as president, by the way, I thought he did an extraordinary job.
He did,
And
actually. All this crap about Biden being so old and all that, that was true, and he shouldn't have run again. But the fact was, he did more for working people than any president since Lyndon Johnson. It really is incredible. And the funny thing is, the red states got most of the benefits because they were hurting. And now Trump is going in and clipping the ribbons on Biden's projects, and of course claiming that, I don't even listen to the news anymore when Trump is on, because
well, but yeah,
that's not true.
but his states are hurting. I mean, and the farmers are hurting, and they're starting to wake up, I think.
That's
But
true.
I find it so interesting. During Biden's 4 years, we did not see massive amounts of people protesting his agenda. There were a few, but not many like we're seeing today, where hundreds of thousands of people are getting out in the streets. Look what happened yesterday in London. They say 1 million people came out to protest Trump's visit to meet King Charles. I mean, if the right was so upset with Biden, where were his people? Because we're certainly putting a lot more people out on the streets now.
Well, they were all trying to overthrow the government on January 6th. That's what they were doing.
It's very true. Very true. Um, so, I feel as if our country and the world are really solidly behind the values and the mission of the Democrats and the Democrat and progressive agenda. So, how does this guy keep winning?
The same way that Viktor Orban won, or that the right wing won in Poland until the recent election, or that Nigel Farage managed to get the British out of Brexit. You keep winning by appealing to our worst emotions, to hate and anger. The scary thing about this is that young people are really adrift in this, and the internet which I thought was going to be the most fantastic invention ever, has turned out to be a disaster. Principally because the people who run the internet, the companies, have these algorithms which appeal to hate and anger. And those are very powerful emotions which have not served humankind well throughout our very long history. And so that's where we are. We have a generation that's been cast adrift. My generation needs to get the hell out of the way and let 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds make their own determinations. Oddly enough, one of the great things I think that's happened in Vermont and in many other states is that cell phones are not allowed in schools anymore. I think this addiction to the electronic world is really, really dangerous because it basically brings out the worst in people most of the time, not the best in people. The communications is great, and all that. But when you get on these websites, I had to tell my 9-year-old grandson who loves baseball, he had some smooth talking guy on saying he get a special deal on this and that. And I just turned to him and he says, nice looking guy on the internet and all this. And I said, this guy's lying to you. Everything he says is a lie. So you have to understand that. They don't understand that. They take all this stuff for granted. So it's really, really dangerous. We're obviously not going to get rid of the internet, but we have to figure out how to educate our children and our grandchildren about the dangers of the internet, which are real. And there are a whole bunch of people who exploit others, evil people who exploit others, who take their money from vulnerable people, which is children and old people. And they use the internet to do that. We've got to be much, much smarter about that.
Hear, hear. Okay, so let's move on to the Supreme Court. Why did they give Trump immunity? I mean, come on.
Because they're owned by Trump. The Supreme Court for 30 years. I mean, the key here was the 2000 election, where the Supreme Court, in a partisan 5-4 vote led by a Republican Chief Justice, decided that President Bush was the president. Now, the truth is, if they had followed the Constitution and used the congressional process that's set for essentially for tie votes, Bush would have won anyway. So there wasn't a big flap about it, but that was the death knell of the Supreme Court. And every single confirmation process under every single American Republican president has been marred, and the Republicans have essentially cheated. McConnell of Kentucky was appalling when he held up nominees or rushed through nominees that didn't belong to the Senate; they belonged to the president. And we've got this collection of third-rate legal minds as the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is a failure, and more than half of the American people believe that. And it's a disaster. If we get back in power, we're going to have constitutional amendments for two things. One is the Supreme Court needs to have time limitations on how much time they need to be there, and it needs to be rotated, and we need to expand the court. Two, we need to put term limits on senators and Congress people. Now, I hate to say that because Patrick Leahy was the best thing ever for the state of Vermont. And I used to say when I was governor that he was the fourth biggest industry in Vermont in terms of how much, look at all the things that he did. And that was a product of his longevity as well as his skills. But the truth is, this country is not well served by letting people have careers in politics. The people who wrote the Constitution never intended politics to be a full-time occupation. It's one of the reasons in Vermont that I like is the 2-year term. And everybody hates it because they don't like the ads. Well, you know what? If you want to live in a democracy, you're going to have to put up with elections. And if you don't like them, then go live in Hungary or someplace. But, the 2-year cycle is great because you have to face the voters every time. And if they don't like you, they can get rid of you. We obviously can't have the 2-year cycle at the national level, but we need term limits. I'd give three terms to a senator and 5 terms to a congressperson, and then you're done.
I hear you. So just this week, the Supremes voted in favor of racial profiling based on the color of someone's skin or their language and if they hold a low-paying job. How is this constitutional?
I mean, they make up the Constitution. Look, this is a court that's totally out of control. They have no regard for the Constitution. They have an agenda. Roberts has had an agenda. He made it very clear many, many years ago. And that's what they're going to do. They're just simply another branch of government, and they mostly rubber stamp Trump. And I have no respect for the Republicans on the Supreme Court at all. I do think that the 3 women that are in the Democratic side are distinguished jurists. There's not a single person who I would call a distinguished jurist on the Republican side. They rubber stamp the right-wing stuff, and that was their agenda. And that is why they got appointed and selected by the Federalist Society and rammed through the Senate.
Here, here. So, Governor, do you believe we are in a constitutional crisis?
Yes. There's no question about it. Every day, the president does things that are unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court has made it clear they have no intention of stopping that.
So, explain to my viewers what you mean when you say we have a neo-fascist government.
Fascism, everybody thinks of Mussolini or Hitler or, whatever, and there are plenty of authoritarian governments now. But what I would call a neo-fascist government is the beginnings. What you see in our country is what you saw in Hungary when Orban took over and gradually undermined the civic institutions, undermined the courts, controlled the legislature, cheated on elections. And that's what the Republicans are doing now, especially they're leading by Trump. The thing is that makes me so sad is I got along great with the Republicans when I was governor, because I was fiscally conservative and they were fine. The Republicans in Washington are so afraid of Trump. Some of them are good people and they know what the right thing to do is. They're afraid to do it. Another reason for term limits. If you know you're going to go out, it doesn't matter if the president or endorses somebody else. So maybe you could do what was right for the country instead of doing what was right for save your butt from the president's wrath.
So well said. But you have said that you're optimistic about our current state of affairs.
I tell you why I'm optimistic.
Yep.
My father once told me when he was my age and I was young, I still have an advantage over you. I can look backwards as well as forward. And I thought, yeah, Pops, sure. Well, now that I'm old, here's my sort of life scale. So when I was a freshman in college 5,000 years ago, I had 2 black roommates. Neither of them had ever been to school with a white person before. I had never been to school with a black person before. My junior year in college, women were allowed to go to the Ivy League. before that, women were not allowed at most of the Ivy League schools. Um, I didn't know a single person, not one person in my class in college who dared say they were gay. To say that you were gay in an atmosphere. Now, this is when I was in college, right? Today it's completely different. So we've changed dramatically. Lyndon Johnson, for all of us, our anger about the Vietnam War, which was substantial and deserved, he he made healthcare available to seniors who didn't have any money, healthcare available to poor people. He put meals in schools. He transformed the country for better. And we haven't been, now Trump is trying, and the right wing is trying to get rid of those things, but they're going to fail. And if they don't fail, then they're going to lose the elections. And I don't care how much you cheat, you're not going to be able to save some of these people who have cut Medicare for old people or Medicaid for young people.
So is that how you think they're going to fail, by losing in the elections?
I do. And I think Trump will try to steal the elections, and some will be stolen, but it's going to be a landslide.
Okay. That's good to know, because I remember Nixon in his second term, I think he won all the states but one. And within
Right.
a year and a half, he was gone.
That's because the conservatives stood up for what was right and not for our country and not for their party. Today, I'm not sure where that would happen because I don't see a lot of backbone in the Republican Party. Um,
Some of them are I mean, even Tucker Carlson today came out and said he doesn't like what's going on. So now, are you supportive of Bernie, or Vermont
yeah,
Bernie, being out there
I
speaking
am.
truth to power?
Bernie says the things that need to be said, and I'm very, very supportive of
Thank
Bernie.
you. And what about Gavin Newsom and JB Pritzker speaking up? I mean, shouldn't
I think they're doing a great job, and I wish there were more of them, and they're getting to be more of them.
I agree with you that I sometimes feel as if, the Democratic Party is unable to stand up and speak out against this
We're going to
administration.
see, Melinda, we're going to see very shortly how much backbone there is in the Democratic Party because we have a budget vote coming up, and the budget is toxic because it's only written by the Republicans. And if the Democrats allow the budget to go through, Americans are going to be punished more. Last time this came up, the Democrats did allow the budget to go through. This time they have a choice. If they vote for the budget, we're going to suffer some more. And all our constituency groups are going to be the ones that suffer. If they vote no, the government's going to shut down. I personally think that if Trump puts all the toxic crap that he's got in the budget now and the Republicans are busy passing, that the government should shut down. And this is going to be the big test of the Democrats inside Washington. The good news is there are tons of young people in groups like Run for Something and Swing Left all over the country, which are getting 30-year-olds to run for office. We got to have that more and more and more. And if they have to challenge people, some of these people are my friends, but they're 80 years old. If they have to challenge them in a primary, I say go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, you're a doctor. You've got to admit that Donald Trump is, seriously ill on many levels. So I want to talk to you about this. I mean, how did you get dismissed in your run for president, which really, truly, so many people thought you could win, for a rallying yell, and Trump gets away with grabbing a pussy or saying he
That's
grabs
I
pussy?
didn't get dismissed because of the yell. I'd already lost. We got dismissed because we weren't well organized.
Okay, well, I still thought you should have won,
Well,
but
I thought so too. Thanks, Melinda.
but yeah, well, you know how I feel about you. But Trump gets away. I mean, that should have been the end of it, or him, imitating somebody with a disability. I mean, what has happened to our country from, 15 years ago to now, that we've lost so much of our civility?
It's a lot of it is the same thing we were talking about earlier. Hate and anger overtake a lot of things. It's why the internet is so toxic because the corporate people who run the internet who sell stuff know that hate and anger and a lot of these shows that people put on and all this kind of stuff are based on hate and anger, calling out, picking on minorities or gay people or whatever, women especially. Um, that's how you sell. And Trump is a master at that. He's a master at hate and he's a master at anger and blaming everybody except taking no responsibility himself.
Well, what about the nationalists? I mean, these evangelical nationalists who want to see our country be a white country.
Well,
And
again,
in the churches and stuff, they're basically, it's almost like the brown shirts in Germany. They're just,
those people are in a minority and Trump has enabled them and they're not anywhere close to a majority. This is not an intolerant country, although we've had
it's
in
not.
many cases a very intolerant past. And I think a lot of people have changed dramatically, as I talked about during my own story about my own life. And we're going to continue to change, but we've got to get back in control of the political process, not so we run everything, but so we have a process that people think is fair. And right now, it is not fair.
And I actually think 70% of the country supports our values and our mission and the way that we
I think
see
that's right. I
and
agree with that.
20%. So we're really power and being led by a minority right now. So now you talk about the GOP playing by a new set of rules. And we do see that in every area of our federal government. They are redefining what democracy is by destroying it, and the Constitution is being ravaged. So, I mean, I just feel like this every day something happens and we're like, oh my God. And it just continues to happen. We're not stopping it, even though there's been a lot of lawsuits. Talk to us about that. How do we counter this?
Well, a lot of it is luckily we have 50 states in this country. And I was very heartened by the fact that the Western states, California, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, have gotten together and they basically have formed their own CDC. We're in a coalition that's not as well organized in the East, in New England, with the exception of New Hampshire, I think. And New York, and I'd like to see New York and Pennsylvania as part of this, and Maryland and Delaware. We need to replace the standards that have been put in place by this nutcase who's pretending to be the HHS secretary, and we have to have a CDC. We can pool. The great thing about the United States is there are 50 states, and there are a lot of like-minded people who don't want to see their children die from measles, and that is even included in red states. We need to form institutions to replace the ones that the president has destroyed. And I think we can do that. We should do that. I'd like to see a little more working together. The attorneys general have been fantastic working together and taking things to court. We need the healthcare people to work together. We need the environmental people to work together. What's going on in the red states is a travesty, and the stuff that Trump is doing to global warming is going to come back and bite us big time. It already is. The droughts that farmers are suffering now, and many of them voted for Trump. So, and that's actually what happened last time Trump ran. I think you're going to see Iowa be converted back to a Democratic state. I think we're going to win the governorship and a Senate seat and a House seat. Right now, we've got nothing. Why? Because Iowa people are well educated and they'll put two and two together, and Trump has decimated their states. And now he's pretending not to. Well, Iowans are not dumb. They're well educated people. And there are a lot of people like that around the country who want to work together. The state governments are not in that bad shape. There are some that are ridiculous. Florida, of course, is absurd. With a governor and the health commissioner want to think vaccinating people is the equivalent of slavery. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Even people in Florida know this is BS. And parents who have small children know that it's dangerous to take your kids to Disney World because now you no longer have herd immunity there. Well, sooner or later, the business community, you can do a lot of stuff that's bad, screaming, yelling, and carrying on. It's bad for business. And sooner or later, the business community is saying, wait a minute, we can't do this anymore.
Well, yeah, look what Disney just did yesterday. Did you know that
Oh,
Governor Scott just said that anybody, any age can get vaccinated in Vermont?
yeah, that's fantastic. That we need to see more of that, but we need to coordinate that with other states.
Right.
We can't have 50 different rules for getting vaccinated. We need to do it in clumps. We need to do it in clumps on environmental stuff. We need to do it in clumps on healthcare. There needs to be consistent policy. And if we can't have a consistent federal policy because we have lunatics running the federal government, then we can do it state by state. And that does not exclude Republicans. Because one thing is, if you're a Republican governor, you're going to be much less susceptible to intimidation by the president, partly because the president is a lousy chief executive, and most governors are not lousy chief executives. And there are a number of Republican governors who I don't agree with, but I think are doing good jobs.
Well, that's great. So now you've come out in support of Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York.
Right.
Bernie has too, as have so many of us, but Schumer and the Democratic power brokers are not supporting him. What's with that? I mean, yet again, what's with that?
Missing the boat.
Yeah.
Plain old missing the boat. This guy, I mean, we should be thrilled that a 33-year-old is going to be the next mayor of New York.
Yeah.
And this is a breakthrough. This is what we need in the Democratic Party, is having 35-year-olds be in Congress and 33-year-olds be the mayor. And I don't worry, at least, I'm more conservative than most Democrats. I certainly was when I was governor, about money. I'm not going to worry about his ideas. If he can't pay for them, they're not going to happen. And he'll figure out how to pay for the really important ones. He's going to get people like Brad Lander, who was a very experienced guy, who's going to probably be the deputy mayor or something like that. This is a guy with ideas. He knows how to talk to people, and we desperately need people in that generation to take the reins of power so they're in charge and they don't resent us for staying in charge longer than we should.
Absolutely. And a whole generation's been disenfranchised in the last 15, 20 years. So, as the governor, you were the governor who gave us Dr. Dinosaur here in Vermont, and it provides free health care coverage for those Vermont children under the age of 19. So, let's move to health care.
Well,
How
let
are
me
you?
correct that slightly.
What?
In fairness, I do get that credit all the time. Madeline Kunin actually
Oh,
started Dr. Dinosaur.
oh,
It was at that time, it was for pregnant women and children under 6. All I did was expand it to cover children up to the age of 19. And I bumped up the level of, so it is true that most kids in our state get health care on Medicaid and get it for free.
and bravo to
It's
Madeline.
important.
I'm going to see her tonight at the Emerge group, and I'm going to tell her that, bravo. Thank you on that. So, how are you feeling about the state of our health care here in Vermont and across the country? I mean, do you believe we will ever join all other industrial countries and provide universal health care to our
I
citizens?
do. I
You do?
do. It won't be a copy of somebody else's system, but I think we can do it. And we weren't that far from it before Trump was elected and the
In
right
your
winners.
lifetime? In your lifetime, you
Yeah.
think you'll see
Oh,
it?
yeah. I think so. I think
Wow.
so.
Oh, this
I
is
think we'll get there by expanding Medicaid and Medicare. And then I think we're going to have to control the insurance. I'd actually like to get the insurance companies out of the business of healthcare because they take a tremendous amount of money out without giving much value back. I tried to get the medical center to start their own healthcare system because that health insurance system, because that brings all the money into the hospital. We can regulate that. We actually have a very good regulation in this state. The Green Mountain Care Board, I think, does a terrific job, but you don't need insurance companies. The hospitals can handle all those functions themselves. You don't need pharmacy benefit manufacturers. They just suck money out. Actually, the higher the drug prices, the more money they make. So there's a lot of stuff in the healthcare business that needs to be changed. I don't think we're going to suddenly see that the British, universal healthcare system descended, or even the Canadian system, which interestingly is a fee-for-service system. But I think we'll have an American system, and there may be a big bounce back. I don't know what's going to happen politically in this country, and disaster could certainly happen. But if it doesn't, I suspect there'll be a bounce back. And I think the Democrats are taking exactly the right position on not voting for this right-wing budget unless it undoes some of the terrible things that Trump and the Republicans have done to healthcare.
Here, here. Now, you live in Burlington, and I am sure you have been following the homeless problem affecting the city. So, what answers do you have for taking care of our homeless and those with mental instability? Because, as you know, a Fox News host just suggested that we euthanize them, which is sickening.
What do you expect from Fox? I mean, that's what you get for watching Fox.
But he didn't get kicked off his show.
Oh, he didn't, because of course he's a right-wing nutcase.
That's right.
People don't kick right-wing nutcases off. They love them sometimes. Um, okay, there's 3 different populations of homeless people, and you can't treat them all the same. The first and the most highest priority is families with children, and they need to be taken care of. And we can build either by I have a huge respect for the Chittenden County housing. I can't remember what the Champlain housing. They really know more about housing, I think, than anybody in the state. And we can do what Mike Monty did. It was buy a motel, and we need to do more of that. So that's the chief priority. Because if you let children be homeless, they're going to grow up to homeless adults, and they're not going to have an education, blah, blah, blah. The second is people who are ill, seniors or single, and that is also, we can fix that. We know how to fix it. We know how to run various assisted living. So, okay, it's going to require some construction and some money. That's fixable. The next problem, and the biggest problem, is people with substance abuse disorder. That is a major problem. I personally do not believe that we can mix in the people with substance abuse disorder with all the other homeless people, because it makes things worse. It makes the living conditions worse. There's going to have to be a place. You can't force somebody to be detoxed. You can't force them, but we need to give them the opportunity to do that. And we need to separate them out from the population of other homeless people. And finally, the very most difficult in some ways are the mentally ill people who are really mentally ill. Now, I am not for going back to the days of Waterbury, where you had a huge institution, but you cannot continue to have people who are really seriously mentally ill wandering around the streets. It's not just Burlington, it's anywhere. Not because they should be imprisoned because they look funny and they talk funny and they're screaming and yelling, but because they get worse and worse and worse without any support. When I was governor, we began to just fiddle at a low level with what to do. We bought a place in the old North End. I think it was the St. John's Hole or it was an old fraternity or fraternal organization. And we put 15 people in there who were homeless. At that time, the major population of homeless people was mentally ill people and a staff person. You cannot just house people with serious mental illness without any kind of support systems at all. And their only job of the staff person was, one, to make sure there weren't terrible fights breaking out in the hall, and two, to make sure everybody took their meds.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I think now those are the three things. Is this going to be perfect? No, but we cannot continue with what's going on now.
We can't. We have a great group called Building Burlington's Future. I just spoke up at Jenna's Promise in Johnson. That's another great group. So we're getting to the end of the show. So I just wanted to let me get to my view here for gallery. I have two names that I want to say to you, and I want to just hear quickly what you have to say. Robert Kennedy Jr.
Sad case. I mean, he's mentally ill and he has no business being in this position, but it is going to give the states an opportunity to step up and do the right thing, as we said before. And that's what I want to see.
I have a grandson who's autistic, non-speaking, and he's a poet, a published national poet. I was so insulted by Kennedy's comments. I mean,
he's a ridiculous person.
He's really a horrible man. The other one is Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, Jimmy Kimmel's great. This is why I say we're in a neo-fascist environment, because Trump's appointee, who's the head of the FCC, basically said this is almost an exact quote: Disney's going to be in a lot of trouble unless they can fix this problem. Basically, the government is telling people that they can't be on the air if they make Snyder. And I saw what Kimmel said. I wouldn't have said it, but it didn't rise to the, I mean, look at what the people are. It certainly wasn't, let's kill all the homeless people. I didn't see Kilmeade getting thrown off Fox for saying that. You cannot have the government tell people what they can and can't say.
That's right.
And that is exactly where Trump and the Republican Party is going. And that's why I believe we live in a neo-fascist society.
Well, there's also a law that says a station cannot reach more than 36% of the population. And they want to get rid of that.
Right. I'm sure they do. They'd like to get rid of anybody who disagrees with them.
Oh, yeah. They want Fox.
That's how Hitler started.
Well, here on that. So, as we come to the end of my show, I just so admire you, and I watch you when you're on these incredible shows talking about all this stuff. But I know that many of my viewers out there are feeling deep despair with the way that our country is falling into fascism. So what words of support and wisdom can you give the 70%, or at least in this, certainly probably more in this state, who really are very, very frightened and concerned about where we're at?
Do what you can every day. I understand that this is a hard time to live through, but do what you can. Make sure you do something every day to stand up for what you know is right. And that's contagious. I'm not asking you to be out in the street, smacking whatever Nazis around, but I want you to stand up for what you believe in. I'm not asking you to go up to these thugs that are pretending they have government work for the government and have masks on so you can't tell you who they are. Oh. I'm not asking you to go up and confront them, but I am asking you to speak publicly. I'm asking you to support the people they're persecuting, because that person could be you next. Just what happened in Nazi Germany in the 1930s.
Governor Howard Dean, it is always a delight to spend time with you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for joining us. And I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.